Hi, my name's Gabs, and today we're looking at the psychoanalyst Melanie Klein. We're primarily going to focus on her book, Envy and Gratitude, so let's dive straight in. Melanie Klein was a Jewish Viennese psychoanalyst who was born in 1882 in Austria. She was known for her psychoanalytical work with children, devoting much of her life to developing Freudian theories. Klein pioneers ideas such as object relations, the paranoid schizoid position, the psychoanalytical play technique, and her most famous work, Envy and Gratitude. So today this lesson is going to look at what are our first experiences of envy? What is envy and how is it different to greed and jealousy? What is gratitude and how does our gratitude impact our generosity? How does envy impact our development from childhood to adulthood? We'll also look at the strengths, the limitations and problems of Klein's theory on envy and gratitude. And then we're going to look at some of my personal feelings towards Klein's theories. So why child analysis? Let's read this quote by Melanie Klein. Experience has taught me that the complexity of the fully grown personality can only be understood if we gain insight into the mind of the baby. What we take as a given today in terms of reflecting on childhood, how we related to the world at such an impressionable age, and how we were parented, was actually a brand new school of thought in the Victorian period. We also must take into account that when Melanie Klein was alive, the expectations of a woman was to get married, care for their children, and be the angel of the house. Therefore, Klein was this wonderfully radical example of an early feminist developing her own ideas, writing papers, and eventually moving to London, where she lived until she died in 1960. Now, Klein supported Freud's theories. She observed young children to confirm Freud's findings. And we'll read this quote from Freud here. So what we're in search of is a picture of the patient's forgotten years that are necessary to reconstruct. It's an archaeological excavation of some dwelling place that has been destroyed and buried, or of some ancient edifice. Why I find this metaphor so interesting is it suggests that along the journey of aging, the client has lost something sacred to themselves. Now, this sacred thing might have been destroyed. Maybe this was a behavior or an emotion that we don't necessarily deem acceptable to the public world or even ourselves. And we'll come back to look at this in more detail later. But the question I want you to think about is, what emotions and feelings does society deem unacceptable? And think about how that might have an impact on the way we present ourselves to the wider world, and how this might be repressing certain things within ourselves. Just think about that. Let's look at some of what Klein suggests are our earliest experiences of envy. So envy is the most potent factor that undermines feelings of love and gratitude. These emotions, love, gratitude, envy, they're constantly at war and are first experienced towards the mother when breastfeeding. So apparently, according to Klein, the absence of the breast, so after the baby's been fed, the absence of the breast fuels the child's grievance and hate, and as a defense mechanism against this sort of uncertainty and anxiety triggered by this absent breast, the baby splits the mother into two parts, the good breast and the bad breast. The infant feels that the breast possesses everything he or she desires, and it has this sort of unlimited flow of milk and love, which the breast actually keeps for the baby's own gratification. So we kind of have to perceive the breast from the baby's point of view. So the baby's point of view of the good breast is kind of like, I love you. You are a source of pleasure. You keep me alive. And then the baby's point of view of the bad breast, however, is you torment me. You're not always around. And how do I know you're going to return? Funnily enough, the good breast is also envied because although the infant feels gratified by the good breast, it seems like this sort of unattainable gift. So the breast is seen as this unlimited flow of milk, But on the one hand, the baby's grateful. However, they're also envious of the breast because the breast is in control of the resources, the milk which the baby needs to survive. So there's an element of fear and anxiety conjured up in the baby because there's always this threat that the pleasure and the sustenance is going to be taken away. And together, these conflicted feelings adds to the baby's sense of resentment and hostility, and the result is a disturbed relationship with the mother. And when the baby experiences envy towards the mother's breast, it launches sort of these sadistic attacks on the mother's breast to destroy or ruin the object of envy. Something I just want to add to this theory that Klein didn't know at the time, but we now know today, is that when a child breastfeeds, the hormone oxytocin is released in the mother's milk. And oxytocin is the love hormone, which induces bonding. So this hormone could effectively alleviate a disturbed relationship between the mother and child, inducing both love and gratitude, and therefore lessening these effects of envy. Klein observed there was a difference in the levels of envy and gratitude experienced between the babies who were adequately fed and inadequately fed. If you were adequately fed, you would experience more gratitude as a baby. If you were inadequately fed, you might experience more envy. But to explore this theory further, we need to explore the differences between envy, jealousy, and greed. What is envy? Envy is the angry feeling we experience towards another person who possesses and enjoys someone or something that is desirable to us. Furthermore, we have the impulse to steal that thing away or spoil it. According to Klein, envy only applies when one person is experiencing it towards one other person. Which makes sense if the earliest envy is experienced during the baby's exclusive relationship with their mother. What is jealousy? Jealousy is based on envy, but we can be jealous of more than one personal thing. Jealousy is usually associated with love when the jealous person fears that something precious could be taken away by a rival. But then what is greed? Greed is an insatiable craving that exceeds what a greedy person needs and what the other person is able and willing to give. A baby experiences greed when it wants to steal and completely devour the breast, whereas envy not only wants to steal away the desired object, but wishes to put badness into the mother, projecting parts of the baby's bad self into the mother. So there's an important distinction between envy and greed. Greed is about introjection, whereas envy is about projection. To put it simply, envy is pain at seeing another person have what they want for themselves. Jealousy fears to lose what it has, and greed is insatiable. This leads us to gratitude. So what is gratitude? Gratitude plays an important part in our capacity to love. It's essential for building a relationship with the good object, the mother, and the perceiving good in others and ourselves. So gratitude arises in the earliest stages of infancy when it's just mother and baby. This early bond at the pre-verbal stage is the basis for all later relations. How mad is that? So yeah, Klein states that this early bond at the pre-verbal stage is the basis for all later relations, and most importantly, the potential of feeling unity with a lover. So the more the child experiences gratification from the breast, the more the child will wish to return to a pleasurable and joyful state. Gratitude is related to generosity. If we feel an inner sense of wealth, which comes about from feeling that we have successfully integrated the good object, we feel we can share gifts with others. This has a knock-on effect, for this makes it more possible that we will introject a more friendly outer world, and this feeling of enrichment grows. However, strong envy undermines our sense of generosity and gratitude. Envy is seen as one of the 7 deadly sins because it not only goes against virtues, but it actively seeks to destroy all virtues. And if we take the virtues to be the good primal object, And if the child seeks to destroy the good primal object, then it impairs their ability to trust in the sincerity of others and makes them doubt their capacity of their own love and goodness in later life. So, children who have a strong capacity for love and gratitude usually have a deep-rooted relationship with a good object and have better resilience against envy. So a child who is loved and well-developed is more resilient against temporary states of envy and grievance and hatred. When a child's negative states are transient, this shows the child has a good object relation, whereas negative states that become stagnant and habitual is a sign of bad object relations, and therefore the child will develop a proclivity towards envy, jealousy, and greed. Moving on to the final portion of this presentation, let's look at some of the strengths and limitations of Klein's theories. In her book, she uses the male pronoun his extensively. So male babies are central to the theories, and this leaves out the female babies. How are they different? How are they similar? There is no mention of diversity, race, or sexual orientation, or children with physical or mental disabilities. So, how do these differences impact the object relations also? And then I was thinking about mothers who do not or cannot breastfeed. There are plenty of women out there who don't breastfeed. So how does this impact the relationship they have with the child? And what about the children who had wet nurses? So it was quite common in the Victorian times for women of a higher status to have wet nurses, which would be a servant who would breastfeed the baby for the aristocratic lady. And lastly, how does this change when formula milk was invented in the 20th century? I wonder what Melanie Klein had to say on that. So some of the strengths, the theories on envy and gratitude still hold true to this day for the most part. The theories of how we relate to people, objects and things during childhood applies to how we relate to the world as adults. That's one thing we definitely know for sure. And then the distinction between envy, jealousy and greed feels really accurate to me. Lastly, just some personal thoughts. How would these theories be used in the therapy room? So sometimes the patient has split off the envious and hostile parts of themselves and only presents the part of themselves that they feel will be acceptable to the analyst. The overall journey between client and analyst can only be effective if it integrates the split off parts. So the client must recognize their perceived negative parts and assimilate them into the whole of their personality. So that's everything. As I said, this is just an introduction to Melanie Klein, so please feel free to read further. If you want the slides and notes for this deck, head to my Patreon. If you want to chat, come hang out on Instagram. And yeah, thank you again, guys. I appreciate you watching. Comment below, give it a like, subscribe, and I'll see you next time.